So many different needs. And to this one, Bartimaeus, you asked him what it is that you want me to do for you. And we can imagine you're asking that question of us. And we hope that with the same kind of clarity that Bartimaeus had, we might know the kinds of things that are really important to ask for, would be so graced to ask for them. In Christ's name, amen. Please be seated. Today's gospel has just got a wealth of things to say about. Wonderful, wonderful text here. Today, Jesus has someone asking him, calling out to him. And then Jesus asks him a question. What do you want me to do for you? Most people have at least one or two questions they want to ask God on some future day. We tend to see this as a time when we'll have an opportunity to be the questioner and God to be the answerer. In some version, perhaps, of why grandmother, the finest person we knew, why she had to suffer so long and so terribly. Maybe we know deep down inside that this question has no emotionally satisfactory answer. But just on the chance that it might, we're going to hope to put it before God. We're hoping that in the justice of God, the crazy chapters of our own lives will somehow have played a redemptive role somewhere else in the world, in someone else's life. Just the way Jesus' death was terrible for him, but also incredibly wonderful for others. Who knows what might be revealed in these conversations with God and how much will be forever wrapped in mystery that we just seem to come to terms with. For now, I'm convinced that the human condition is to live with a modicum of confusion, and that our faith offers us hope for peace. This past week, I was at Camp Allen with clergy, and that's an annual event in the latter part of October. It begins on Monday and ends at about noon on Wednesday. At about noon on Wednesday, we're dismissed, but before we were going to all go on out into, there's about 150 of us, and we don't know each other because there are always new clergy coming in. And so there we stood in this rather large circle around a table, and on the table, these little glasses of sherry, little teeny little half an ounce, and some food and so forth. And what we were doing is celebrating John Logan's life. I don't know John Logan well, but lots of people know the name in this diocese. He's 90, he was celebrating his 90th birthday. I think he's been a priest for probably 60 years or so. And he's done so many great things for so many people. He's highly admired, highly respected. And so we sang a couple songs to him, one of which was Happy Birthday. And when it finished, there we were standing without any other context for standing there. So I turned to the person next to me, whom I did not know, and I discovered we had name tags on there. Her name was Carissa, a fellow clergy person in the diocese. And in short order, we got to talking, and she told me she had a full life. And she went on, I have a job in parish ministry as an associate. I have a husband and two 4-year-olds. 2 4-year-olds? So I quickly responded, oh, wow, I have twin 22-year-olds. And she smiled and exclaimed, that's so cool. That's so encouraging. Now, I thought we were having an easy conversation based on our both having twins. And I added, and they have a younger brother by 2 years. She said, well, that's not going to happen. We started later than most. I understand, didn't have to say a word, nodded my head. And then I asked if her twins were fraternal or identical. She responded that one was a boy and one was a girl. Okay, I said, smiling, thinking she'd answered my binary question. And they're 4 months apart. Oh? I said, a bit confused, knowing that the twins can't be 4 months apart. Then my mind began to pull apart what I was hearing. Something is different than I thought, and suddenly I'm realizing this is a different conversation than I thought we were having I don't have the right picture in my mind. And she said then, and one has Down syndrome. I paused, and in a slightly different tone said, you do have a full life. And realized how little I actually understood about her and her 4-year-olds, her daily life, and the particular path she walks with Jesus. She closed the conversation saying something so incredibly gracious. She said maybe she could come down to Friendswood someday for lunch with Karen and me for some more conversation. For a little while, I was thinking we were having an easy answer, boots on the ground conversation, and yet she was drawing me into and wanting to continue a hard question conversation that left me slightly off balance and wondering. And that's what we see in the ministry of Jesus as he encounters people. He answers few questions directly, more often responding with a question of his own that put people off balance. When he spoke to Nicodemus, he said, are you a teacher of Israel, Nicodemus, and yet you don't understand these things? I have it on good authority that Jesus was asked 183 questions in the gospel. Some overlap. Do you know how many he answers directly? 3. 3 of 183. This is totally surprising to people who have grown up assuming the job description of any and all religions, including Christianity, is to give people answers and to resolve people's dilemmas. Apparently, this is not Jesus' understanding of the function of the movement he began, because he operates very differently. When he meets someone, invariably he asks a question or two. It's not too much to say that Jesus takes people into important conversations, most often by asking a question, often in the context of a short, tantalizing, brain-teasing story. Examples. When the Pharisees asked the question about paying taxes, a binary question, really. Should we or shouldn't we pay Caesar taxes? Jesus asks them a question. Whose likeness is on the coin? He draws them into, and then he's going to have them. And then he answers enigmatically. Easy for you to say this morning. He says enigmatically, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Which beg larger and deeper questions. Well, just what is God's? And what does it mean to render things to God? On another occasion, a lawyer wanting to feel good about his own life, presumably, on hearing that honoring God meant to love one's neighbor, asks Jesus to define neighbor. He says, and just who is my neighbor? And Jesus tells a story that reframes the question and leaves the man wondering, tilting, can I see the way he sees people? All of them as neighbors? And can I so completely love others like that? On another occasion, when he overhears the disciples, this is just the day before when they were going on the way from Jericho to Jerusalem. The day before, 2 of the disciples, James and John, were arguing about who was greater. And they were wanting to sit at the right hand, at the left hand of Jesus in places of glory and honor and power. And so Jesus at one point later says, what were you guys talking about on the road? It's a question. He knew. He knew. He heard them. But he wants them to repeat it. Because a well-placed question could change entrenched positions on issues, could change well-rehearsed, easy answer conversations in a heartbeat. Oh, crud. We got to go through the conversation we were having? Ooh. Sometimes asked a question and chooses not, sometimes he's asked a question and chooses not to answer at all. He knows direct answers won't help sometimes, as when Pilate asks him if he's a king. Oh. We can't have this conversation because of the different ways we think of king. So he's silent. Many times the only answer that will change a conversation will come through a responsive silence that itself makes people rethink the absurdity of the question and the choices offered. That silence is even better when combined with a quiet prayer for those demanding answers and with a demonstration of genuine love, as Jesus did. Jesus dealt with pointed questions with immense humility and groundedness and purpose. What if we discovered that God was most interested in coming alongside us, coming alongside you to guide you into asking the questions that will bring you and others freedom and hope and clarity of purpose? The question may turn out to be of far greater worth than any easy answers. What if we discovered together that to be Christ-like, to become more like Jesus, to be put on the road with him, would be nothing less than learning from his example on how to ask each other good questions? What if that is what is meant to be a good friend, a good spouse, a good parent, grandparent, godparent? Jesus' style of engaging people is almost exactly opposite of the modern televangelist or even the mainline approach of Dear Abby offerings of inspiring advice and workable solutions for daily living. Now, I don't disparage these helpful tips. I benefit from them. But Jesus is too much the Jewish prophet to merely stabilize the status quo by platitudes or merely entertaining anecdotes. He will instead, with a question, call out the false assumptions on which entire questions and worldviews are built. He's a genius at it. Some time ago, Karen and I met with a couple, not from Good Shepherd, who were struggling in their marriage. It seems they were right on the edge of staying together or moving apart. And we spent 2 4-hour sessions with them. And we felt, as we talked, the two of us alone, that some of their issues could have been resolved very easily. But we didn't dispense any easy answers. We sensed that there was something big that wasn't being talked about. So on the next to last session, we asked them this: how sure are you that you want to be with this person in a covenantal relationship as you both work out the meaning of love? It didn't take a week for that question to bring one of them to clarity. Their big problem wasn't all of those presenting issues that they argued about, like being in a hamster wheel, round and round and round. And in a mystery Karen and I weren't privileged to, one of them confessed on the next appointment that they didn't want to spend any more time with or on the other. And we sensed, perhaps even more importantly, that one didn't really want to work on themselves. G.K. Chesterton said, it isn't that people can't see the solution, it is that they can't see the problem. Getting to the right question is often so much more important than amassing and analyzing information. You know, when it comes to God and Jesus and the Spirit and the Bible, many of us worry that we don't know enough and disqualify ourselves from entering into the conversation, being courageous like Bartimaeus, who knew what he wanted and cried out in the crowded street. Now, Bartimaeus did know enough to refer to Jesus as the Son of David. He knew enough to have his hope in the right person. He approached him with appropriate respect, with honesty, with humility, and with passion. One commentator wrote, quote, Bartimaeus summoned a courage that many of us lack. The great sweet punchline of this story is given to Jesus, who does not ask for fear or virtue. He does not demand righteousness or rectitude. He simply asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" Bartimaeus wants to be healed of his blindness. What a great prayer for those of us whose eyes work. Heal me where I'm blind. But that wasn't the end of it. After healing him, Jesus says to him, "Go your way." But telling him to go his way wasn't telling him anything. Rather, it posed a new question. Namely, what is my way now that I have met Jesus? The questions and comments of Jesus will leave us betwixt and between, where God and grace can get at us. A little off balance, not so strong in our posture, and we are not at all in control, because we like certainty and settledness, and we both crave and resist transformation. Let's just face it, that's true of every person here. We wish we could be different, but the way forward is not something we have the stomach for. In my experience, meeting Jesus and finding faith does not immediately fix the world around us. Oh no. So much as it changes the way we see the world. As we grow in this relationship, we learn to filter through the reality of God and God's reign, that the first become last, and last first. And it is more blessed to give than to receive. What was once confusing now clarifies itself in his light and presence, and what was once an easy answer conversation now becomes less certain. That day, Bartimaeus became a disciple and followed Jesus down a new road towards Jerusalem. Wherever you are on your journey, my hope is that you appreciate the questioning Jesus and will see the questions that he poses to others as relevant to you. His engagement with you is designed not to make your life easier merely, but to transform how you see and think and pray. Not to give quick answers in easy conversations with you, but to call forth a relationship that will give you new eyes and a new heart. And if this is making sense, my hope is that you'll go from here today knowing that in following Jesus, your strength comes not from having lots of answers about this world, but in being in relationship with the one who asks the questions that will lead us into a vital relationship with God and God's world. Crazy as it is, difficult as it is. Because in the realm of soul and spirit, there are not as many absolute answers as we'd like, but there's something even better, namely a person, an answering person who becomes our closest companion, ally, comforter, and guide. Today, Jesus asks you and asks me, what do you wish me to do for you? And he's got good things in mind for you and for me as we wrestle with the question.